Hannah, before you became an executive with the 49ers, you were the first woman to cover UCLA football for the Daily Bruin. So when did you discover that passion that you have for football? And tell me about that experience. What was it like for you?
Sure. So I was a latecomer to football. I grew up in a house where no one played sports or really watched sports in Oakland, California. The Raiders were not there when I was growing up as a kid, though they did come back when I was a teenager. And that's really around the time I first watched like a football game or two, and I was immediately intrigued. I wanted to know more about the game. I wanted to watch more. I remember seeing Bill Parcells coaching and just being sort of like captivated by his command and personality and just being drawn to the game. And then when I got to UCLA as a freshman, though I was from only 300 miles away, I was very homesick and found myself watching lots of sports. And it was actually basketball first that fully pulled me in. It was my freshman year was the first year of the Lakers three-peat of the early 2000s. And I was watching Hannah Storm host the halftime show during NBA playoffs. And, you know, when you're a freshman in college, you're trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to major in? And I was like, oh, well, here's this woman who, you know, she's like me in the sense that at UCLA, I felt very different being, you know, I had dark hair. I wasn't tan. I didn't have a Juicy Couture sweatsuit. Like I didn't wear makeup. And I thought, okay, there's this lady who's, you know, she's smart and she's funny and she gets to just have interesting conversations with other people about sports. Like, how cool is that job? Like, how do I get a job like that? And that's when I applied to the student paper. And I had fallen in love slowly over that year with football. And I was watching Monday Night Football every week. I was watching football on Sundays. I was learning more about the game. And so after my sophomore year, kind of proving myself covering women's tennis, I got the football beat with two other guys. We had, you know, a big program. And so we had coverage every single day. So there were three of us on the beat. And it was an amazing experience. And once I started covering football, I never wanted to go back. I loved the game so much, but I also, once I got to start covering the team, I loved the sociology of it. And I was a sociology major. So just watching kind of organizational dynamics and people, I loved interviewing people. So I knew that that's where I wanted to stay forever.
Well, you worked in media and PR, but then eventually decided, it wasn't, I think maybe only a couple of years, right, before you decided to go to Stanford Law School. What made you decide after only a short amount of time in that field, let me try something else, let me pursue that career, let me go after a law degree?
Part of it was just the time. It was really before digital media had fully exploded and people knew where journalism was headed. And it was when newspapers were, though, already on the decline. And so people said, don't go into that field. It's a dying field. You're going to, you know, die hungry and broke. And, and so I was trying to figure out, okay, I really enjoy journalism, but what else might I like to do? So the first thing I did was a postgraduate internship at the NFL Players Association, the Players Union in DC. And ironically, it was digital media sort of before we really had a name for it. So I was the website intern. I created contests that players participated, like DJ contests where they made what we would now think of as like an Apple playlist, but I literally had them burning CDs and mailing them to me and then judging them. I would do what we would now think of as like a blog, but I called it a player journal. And I would call guys on Monday morning. I would just choose winning teams and start calling people and being like, what did you eat for breakfast? How's your day going? Like, what was the game like yesterday? And just like put together in their own words, like a story. And so once I finished that season, I got a job at UC Berkeley, at Cal in their athletic department doing media relations. And I really enjoyed it, but I could see that I could potentially burn out. And I knew I wanted to go back to school. I was a nerd. I loved school. And so I applied to law school. And when I got into Stanford, I decided to take 6 months before school to go work at an agency because I thought I want to be Jerry Maguire. I was like, I'm going to use this law degree. I'm going to help athletes. And I went to a sports agency and I had a great experience, but I also came out of it thinking, I'm not sure that's actually what I want to do. And so I started to really focus on the work that I might be able to do at a team or at a league, specifically like how could I become a general counsel at a team? So that was really my goal going into law school. And I'm very blessed that ultimately it worked out.
Well, you are the general counsel, obviously, now for the San Francisco 49ers. Your title also chief administrative officer. So when we talk about front office executives for football teams, people are all automatically going to think, oh, what are you talking about? The draft? How involved are you in contract negotiations? What do you do as far as trades, player evaluation, all of that stuff? And of course, a football team, just like any major business, entails different areas. What do you focus most on?
Sure. So my time is split between what I would call all of our business legal work, which is everything from sponsorship agreements to vendor agreements to employment agreements. And then also all of our public affairs, strategic communications, risk management, and then all of our community work. So we have a foundation, we have our prep program, which is youth football. We have our EDU program, which is STEAM education program. We have community relations, which is when you see guys out there, whether they're doing social justice work or maybe they're reading to kids, that's all through community relations. And then also our fan engagement. So we have multiple clubs. We have booster clubs all over the world. We have a women's program, which is our official women's fan club that serves thousands of women who are 49ers fans and gives them unique content that really respects their fandom. And, you know, it's everything from deep X's and O's to profiles of women who are important in the lives of not only our players, our coaches, and also profiles the fans as well. And then we have an LGBTQ plus fan club, which was the first of its kind. So that's some of our fan engagement work. And then our museum, which preserves our history. So those are the areas that I focus on now. I don't really touch anything on the player side. When I was at the NFL league office before I came here, that is what I did. I did salary cap work and worked on the 2011 CBA negotiations. But now I am much more focused on the business side.
So you can't tell us what's going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo or anything. I'm not even going to ask you, Hannah. I know.
Thank you.
As far as the LGBTQ fan club, the 49ers women's fan club, the team has been really on the forefront of a lot of inclusivity and diversity. How did that start? Where does the inspiration come from, the motivation, and who's driving that?
It really comes from ownership, and it comes from our history. Like, I would say, where did that start? I would say Bill Walsh and Dr. Harry Edwards. Coach Walsh was really at the forefront of seeing the future of these issues as far back as the 1980s. And he brought in Dr. Harry Edwards and helped form what is now known throughout the NFL as the Diversity Coaching Fellowship. The two of them started that at the San Francisco 49ers, and ultimately it's become a best practice that the entire league follows. And so they've been very focused on those issues for years. And then I think when you look, people often forget we're actually a woman-owned business, right? Denise DeBartolo York is our controlling owner. We're a family-owned, woman-owned business, and she is a deeply inclusive person. That's giving back is really like her whole focus in life. So I think that trickles down through the whole family, through ownership, through leadership, and kind of informs who we are. And then I think we're very proud of the community that we serve. We're the San Francisco Bay Area. And the San Francisco Bay Area is a very progressive place that seeks to be inclusive of all people, and is a place that there's been a lot of freedom of thought for decades, right? It's known for that through the 60s, 70s, and beyond. So I think that's how it's become sort of woven into our fabric.
Well, you're still a woman in a male-dominated environment. How are you seeing changes being made? How are you seeing you inspiring other women to pursue career avenues like this?
I hope I'm inspiring other women and just young people in general. Like, I always try to say, it's not just about, celebrating and promoting women. It's about celebrating and promoting everyone, but being aware that we're all coming from a different place, that we all have different privileges and different challenges. And so if we're more aware of those unconscious biases and that type of thing, then we're able to actually create an environment that's truly creative, that's truly inclusive. And so we have a lot of wonderful programs internally. We have an organically formed employee resource group for women called 49ers Women Connect, that 3 women formed about 7 years ago. And it's very sort of healthy and thriving. And so I hope to be an example to the young women in our organization and outside of it. And some of that is just through, how do you carry yourself? How can you be a professional? And how can you lift up other people? I think that traditionally in our business, as in many other places, there was probably a bit of, if you're the only one, then you may think there's only room for one at the table, right? You may think, there can only be one woman at the top, so I better be that person. And I hope that we've come to a place where we recognize that you want to add more chairs to the table, right? You want to invite more people in. The more people you lift up, the better. So I think that's what I see, especially among young women in our organization and in our industry. And I think that's really an exciting development. What
do you see as your biggest challenges, and have they decreased over the years that you've been in your role?
I think the biggest challenges are just the ways in which the industry is changing, like the pressure towards digital, the pressure to keep fans' attention. I think as we look at young people and how much time they spend on their phones, on social media, on games, I think just getting kids outside, getting kids to love sports. I see those as sort of, I try to like step back and look at what is our business 10, 20, 30 years from now, because we can become very focused on just the immediate, right? Just reactively responding to the current emergency or what we need to do to sell tickets this year. And I think it's good to kind of take that SWOT analysis and step back and look at what are the pressures on our business over the next decade. And so to me, those are the things that I sort of think about the most, is how do we keep that in-game experience? Obviously, this year has been a challenge unlike any other, because we just took for granted for all of these years that you can bring tens of thousands of people together on a Sunday. And that's what makes our business so special. Like when I look at the challenges and then I look at how we overcome them, I do think that sports is truly unique in that it is the town hall of the modern era. Like people don't gather in very many places anymore, but sports venues is one of the places that people still gather. And where you have people from totally different backgrounds, people who may never encounter each other than being in the same stadium rooting for the same team. And that has a lot of potential for us as a society, and just for our individual enjoyment. I think there's nothing like a live football game.
When you see two female assistant coaches on the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers, what goes through your mind? How does that make you feel? There are more women getting these opportunities, of course, and we want to see more women continue to get these opportunities. But how did you feel about that as you saw that unfold?
Oh, it was beautiful. I loved it. So Coach Lowe, she's so awesome. She reached out to me on Instagram like maybe a year or two ago. So we've become friends really over social media originally. And then we got to meet in person last year in Indianapolis at the Combine. And we were like, oh my God, it's you, like in person. I think that's one of the cool things about social media is it does allow more and more women throughout the industry, or people in general, to connect who might not have crossed paths in person necessarily, and to create, I think there is a real sisterhood among women in the NFL. And I also want to shout out that the Bucs also have Jackie Davidson, who is, I believe, the highest ranking African-American woman on any football side of any team, and one of the highest ranking women, period, on the football side of any team, who's an amazing executive and who I've had the pleasure of working with in various capacities over the last decade plus in her time in the league. And when I look at like what makes me excited and hopeful, I want to see people continuing to grow on the business and football side into roles of real power. Because I think that sometimes it's good that we celebrate and get people into the pipeline, but we need to make sure that over time, these people are actually growing in the pipeline into positions where they have real influence and real power. Because when we look at the business side of organizations, we do see a growing number of women, but we still don't see them as much at the VP and C level, and not at all other than in ownership at the president level. So I think those are spaces where I hope that we continue to grow. But I was so excited to see the two of them. And it was just, it's wonderful to see them celebrating. Coach Lowe was posting photos with her son on the field. And I think to see people as whole people, to see that you can be a mom and a football coach, it's pretty cool.
It's amazing. And to see them winning that Super Bowl and to be there and to be around that, wow, what an incredible experience. Hannah, tell me about your motivation for writing your book, Seasons of Change.
You know, so much of the motivation is what we just talked about. It's about all of the young women who I've met and young men who I've met who are looking to either break into the industry, who are already in the industry and trying to grow, and to some extent, people who are even outside the industry. I met so many young people who wanted to be mentored. And I realized part of it was just at some point, I didn't have the bandwidth to mentor every single person individually. But what can I give you that would sort of replace that? And I was doing a lot of keynote talks and found that I was always giving the audience exercises. I always like to make it interactive. I'm very practical. Like, I want you to have something you can actually use after this. And I find oftentimes I can go to an inspirational speech and I leave and I'm just like on a high. I'm like, this is fantastic. I feel amazing. And then 2 weeks later, I haven't changed any of my own behaviors. Like, it's not having a lasting effect necessarily. And so I really wanted people to have a tool that they could implement in just like 10 minutes a day for a long enough period of time, 8 weeks, where they could really develop a habit. And so for me, it was really about how can I help you actually make a change? Because I don't want to meet you and have you be like, oh, that was a cool speech, and then walk away and nothing changes for you.
Well, I love how you broke it down into those 8 weeks. I want to highlight a couple of them. Week 4, where you say evaluate your team, evaluate the team around you, and determine who plays what role and who should make the roster or be cut. And I love how you relate that to the NFL or a football team. But in life, we have to do that. I know I had to do that over the course of my years, and my life changed dramatically when I started to eliminate certain elements from it. Speak a little bit on that, week 4.
Yeah, week 4 is one of my favorites. It's one that I think a lot of people don't realize how parallel their life is to an NFL team. Just like we have to have a roster on our football team, and people have to be in the right positions on a football team, right? You've got to fill all the right roles with the right people who fit your system. In your life, everyone in your life is on your team or they're somewhere around your team. And you've got to figure out who's on your team, who's not on your team, what role do they play in your life? Are they in the right position? And so I have 4 categories that I think of as sort of like core to your personal team. One is what I call your road dogs. I spend probably too much time around scouts. So I was like, okay, these are your folks who you are like, these are your ride or dies. These are your best friends. These are the people who lift you up when you're down, who celebrate you truly when you win, and who will hold you accountable, who will actually give you what we talk about in week 5 in terms of constructive criticism. So those people are very core to your team. And then second is mentors. And mentors are really coaches who are in your real life. And they may come in many different forms. You could have a mentoring moment that was just one particular lunch, but it could change your life. And you could also have a mentor who maybe is there for 10 years in your life or for your whole life, right? It might be a parent, it might be a pastor, it might be an actual coach in a sport, it might be a teacher, it might be a boss. So that's another category. And then sponsors. And there's a difference between a sponsor and a mentor. A sponsor could be a mentor, but usually a sponsor is the person who, it's not that they're guiding you or giving you advice, it's that they are championing you. So they're the people who they're in another meeting that you're not in, and they're like, you know who should get to do that story? Rob should get to do that story because Rob has been killing it on his podcast. That's the type of people that you want in those sponsor roles. And then lastly, we have strategic partners or allies. So I think sometimes people think I have to be friends with everyone who is helping me on my path or helping me in my game plan or helping me accomplish a project. And the reality is you don't. What you need to figure out are who are people who have an aligned interest with you, who may share in wanting to achieve whatever it is you're working on. And then you need to build partnerships with them. So that's how I think of team in your personal life.
I love that. Evaluate your team. And the other one that I want to highlight a little bit is the final one, week 8, because this is just so awesome. You call it practice, but it's reinforce regular habits of gratitude, focus, and affirmation. I think that is just so important. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you highlighted that one?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the goals of the book is to have you implement those 3 daily practices in your life going forward beyond the book. So we build up to the 3 of those because I know for a lot of people who haven't journaled before, it may feel intimidating at first to be like, oh, I have to do these 3 things every day. I don't want to do it. So in the first week, we kind of build up to 1, and then we add 1 in the second week, and then we add 1 in the third week, so that by the end of the book, I'm not giving you any unique prompts like we did earlier in all the chapters where we focus on different subjects. It's really just making sure that this is a habit that you've developed over 8 weeks that you can carry forward. And the reason that I do those 3 is that I found in my own life that they're the most impactful. They're simple, easy, quick, but they really change your day, whether you're somebody who journals in the morning or at night. And gratitude, I know people talk about gratitude all the time in a variety of places. And I think even in football, even in sports, gratitude is important when you just think about performance mindset. It's very hard to solve problems creatively and to bring your best self if you are just complaining about things and if you're stuck in your head thinking how miserable life is and how unlucky you are and all these other things. So when you stop and say, oh my gosh, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I am in this house that shelters me, I have food in my refrigerator, it changes your entire mindset and it allows you then to attack whatever's in front of you in a different way. The second, the I am statements, the affirmations, that's really about putting positive visualization in your own life. And that's something that athletes do all the time. I had the pleasure of seeing Billie Jean King speak when we hosted Super Bowl 50 many years ago. And I remember she said, as soon as you hear a negative thought come into your head, I want you to immediately replace it with a positive thought. I want you to make sure that the words that you are hearing in your head, because there is nobody that you hear from more than yourself, that those words are words that are affirming you, that are pushing you towards where you want to be. And then the third one, focus. I find it really helpful to come into the day with a specific focus. And you can make it just that one thing you need to get done today. You could make it a more general sort of framework you're attacking the day with. Like it could be, I'm going to come with an attitude of really listening to everybody today. Or I'm focused on my health today. And if I do nothing else, I'm going to drink this 3 liters of water. Whatever it might be, you'll feel more accomplished at the end of the day because you'll be like, okay, at least I did that one thing. And it also just helps you kind of prioritize. You'll find that other things start falling in place in your prioritization.
That is excellent advice, Hannah. Last thing I want to ask you, there are so many different people you quote at the bottom of your pages, from Jerry Rice, Bill Walsh, Mark Twain, so many. The one that stood out to me personally, because it's on my wife's wall in her office, is Proverbs 31:25. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I just read from the NIV version. I think you had a different one in your book. Why did you choose that verse?
So that verse was actually given to me by a friend, and she was encouraging me. And it was a special sort of moment of encouragement, but it's also a verse that I really love, that to me as a woman is something that I aspire to do, to be, to come with kindness and wisdom. And I think it's important for us to think of ourselves in these terms of kind of like, what is the kind of human being I want to be? And how do I want to envision, not only myself, but I just think it's such a beautiful passage. And when you sort of note how wide ranging all the different authors are of the quotes, and then I do have people like Pastor Joel Osteen or Bishop T.D. Jakes, and I have Bill Walsh and Jerry Rice and all these different people. These are all quotes that I collected over the course of my entire life. So I did not sit down to write the book and then start Googling like cool quotes to put in your book. These are things that all had meaning to me. The quote that I was holding the longest in there is the Marianne Williamson quote. And that one I wrote down in 7th grade and carried with me ever since. So these are all like the ones that are from Pastor Joel Osteen or T.D. Jakes. Those are ones where I was watching a sermon and sat and wrote it down. And some of them are from 5-8 years ago. And actually I tried to Google some of them to check them. And they're not even anywhere out. They're not written down. I wrote them down listening and saved them in the notes section of my phone. So they're all just things that are very personally meaningful to me, but that I also felt fit in that page, that prompt. And hopefully we're going to serve somebody else and inspire them for that day. That's why there's a quote on every day, because I'm somebody, I like to have that kind of outside inspiration. I love words. And so it's a way just to hopefully give you kind of a bright moment in your day to start things out with.
Well, I also love the title. It's Season of Change, but it's SZN.
Yes.
You're fitting into exactly what we are right now, into this season of our life, this season of our world. Hannah, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. It was an absolute pleasure to be with you today.
Wish you a ton of blessings. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, you too.